So this morning, we're going to keep going in the life of Jesus. And with that said, Everett, would you mind having our prayer?
Father, we thank you for another beautiful Sabbath morning, especially we thank you that we can worship here together in peace and know that you are with us. Bless now as we delve into the workings of your life. May things we study and learn today help us to continue to stay strong in our faith in you. Yes, in Jesus' name.
Amen. We're going to be, I don't want to say bouncing around this morning, but we're going to take a couple of different journeys on this lesson. We're trying to squeeze everything we can out of the story. And the story is amazing. It's like Doug says every week. We could spend another 2-3 weeks on this one story. And the story, some believe is told in all 4 Gospels. It's the same story. And boy, there's a lot of controversy on this. I had 2 ministers that I love so much to talk to and help me, and they have totally different opinions. Oh, this story is not like the other story about the prostitute, you know, that anointed Jesus, and this story today about the prostitute that came to Simon's house. The scholars are split. So today we're going to take the attitude that this is a different story than what you read on down in the other Gospels. I wanted to ask you a question just on the for the moment here. Doug's lesson last week. So many good comments about John sending word to Jesus, "Are you the one?" And the doubt that came through John's mind and the horrific conditions he was dealing with in a dungeon. We can't imagine. And hopefully, what his disciples went back and told him, gave him courage enough to meet his end. All right, let's kind of turn it around here a little bit. And I want to ask the ladies, what is your favorite cologne or perfume? Oh, Christmas is coming. Thank you. Anything else? Any other brands, favorites? You just like them all? No.
Obsession.
Obsession. What a great name. What a great name, Obsession. And that's been around a while, hasn't it? In my house, I have to remember Chanel number 5. Fortunately, it's not come out, a bottle goes quite a distance, apparently. At least I'm not buying it. That's the only one I can remember. Have you ever been embarrassed by the way someone thanked you? I mean, has anyone ever thanked you and made such a big scene that you were like, enough already, enough. Thank you for thanking me, but I guess, has that ever happened to you? And I get thank yous a lot, but they're not, over the top that I'm like, what in the world is going on here? And I try to be, if someone does thank me, I try to be not embarrassed about it. But someone tried to thank me last week that Alvin, Saint, and I bought someone a gift, and that person baked a chocolate pie.
Jesus can hear you.
Yeah, and he brought it to Alan and me, or they brought it to Alan and me to thank us for the gift.
You wasn't mentioned last week.
And I'm embarrassed about this thank you, is that I didn't get any of the pie.
That's because someone forgot to tell me the other half of that.
Yeah, I saw a picture of it that was sent to me. I didn't get it. I'm very embarrassed about it. Could you think of 25 things that you're thankful for in a hurry? 25 things. I mean, I start fading out after about my family, my wife, my kids, my health, this class, and got a decent house to live in, but it starts to fade. And surely we have 25 things that we could write down. I was gonna bring a sheet of paper and 60 pens and, but surely we got 25 things. I would hope we have 25 things. Somebody asked me, give me 25 things. And I'm like, give me some time. So I don't think we're all quite thankful enough for where we are. Some of us have had a little tougher time than others, and some of us have a lot rougher time than others in the past year or two, 3. And yet, people are thankful even in the darkest hour. Today, we're going to read Luke 7:36 through 50. And it's on page 66 of your Harmony. It's number 58, page 66. John, do you have that?
Yes.
Would you read it to us? Just read it out kind of loud as well. Would you stand, Sean, when you read it?
I can do that too.
Mainly for my benefit.
Now, one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him. So he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. When a woman who had lived a sinful life in that town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster jar of perfume. And as she stood behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "This man were a prophet. He would know who was touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. 2 men owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii, the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he canceled the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt canceled." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who has been forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace."
Thank you, Sean. We'll be discussing this morning, and I want to hear from you. If you have a comment, please raise your hand. But as our class has grown, please hold your comment to no more than 30 seconds. 30 seconds. But comment, please. Raise your hand, speak loudly, but hold it for 30 seconds. If everyone had 1 minute to comment and everybody wanted to comment, we'd run out of time. But we want everyone to comment. Hold it for 30 seconds. But do raise your hand. You read the story. You heard the story. Which section of the local paper would this story be in if it was published tomorrow? Society page, highlighting that local prostitute crashed a party. This Pharisee had this party for Jesus. That being the big society page. The gossip column, because of the scandalous way the prostitute acted toward Jesus. How about the religious page? Jesus, new prophet, claims he has forgiven a prostitute's sin. That could be published. Or the business section. Woman announces her departure from her current profession. On a more serious note, one thing is clear. In this story, Jesus is continuing to push the fact that this is no longer business as usual. Jesus is saying, change is coming and I'm bringing it. And it will not be what you expected. And Jesus says, I will not be what you expected. I'm going to keep pushing the envelope. And Jesus is just saying a few hours ago, yeah, I touched a dead person. And I know that's a no-no in our society. You are not supposed to touch a dead person. I did that. And I also raised him back to life. And things are just not going to be the same anymore. And this will be the continual theme that Jesus is pushing until the cross. Things are going to change, and they're going to change fast. Sean.
Well, going along with what you're saying there, he's there to change everybody's thinking. If you look at this, Simon is focused on the sin, and everybody there is probably focused on all the sins that this lady has done. Jesus is focused on the person, and he's trying to get them to shift their mindset to quit focusing on the sin and focus on the people, love the people.
Yes.
Okay, so it says she was a sinner. Can you hear me okay?
You're my pet project.
And
Okay. 30 seconds. Here we go.
It says she was a sinner. And Jesus is saying, is there anybody that hasn't sinned? He's also saying, every saint has a past, every sinner has a future.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, I want to ask some people who have never spoken up in this class, to answer this, and we'll come back to everyone else. I want you to give me one word, not a sentence, just maybe 2 words, but 1 or 2 words that describes how you process this story in your mind as you process this. And you saw the scene. What was the one word that might come to your mind? How do you feel about it? How are you processing this? What is the word, maybe? How do you feel? Compassion. Thank you for finally speaking up. One of our sages with a history of being a minister. And so here, thank you. Compassion. Anyone else? Yes.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Yes.
Gratitude.
Thank you for speaking for your husband. What did you say?
Gratitude.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now, the rest of my loyal subjects, what do you think? What's the word? Jana, what's the word that comes to your mind? Oh, yes, here it comes.
Faith.
Faith. How about my friends in Zoom land? Roy, what's coming to your mind?
What comes to my mind is that it isn't the number or the amount of sin. It is that we all have sinned and that God will forgive us.
Forgiveness.
Go ahead, Marlene.
Go ahead, yes.
Nakedness.
What you say?
That Jesus could read
Yeah, got it.
mind. It's embarrassing.
Marlene, get closer to your router. You're breaking up.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I said nakedness, embarrassment by the fact that Jesus could understand Simon's thoughts.
Yeah. All right, Rod, what's your word?
Paradigm shift, because we view this through the eyes of that woman, But Jesus was ministering to Simon as much as she was to the woman.
Yeah. So minister. You know, I thought of some words: happy, sad, depressed, encouraged, confused. We're going to shift back 2,000 years from now in just a minute. I want you to not think of being in the room. I want you to think back in this scene, 2000, you're going to project back. For me, the word that kept coming was emotions. You see this woman, the way she's reacted to this, the emotions that is coming through. Yes, the bottom. Oh, hang on. Chat, all right? The word is awkward. Awkward. We're going to get into that. That's a big word in this story. Let's move forward. Thank you. Let me give you the scene. This is where we are in this story. In those days, the well-to-do people built their home around an open courtyard in the form of a hollow square. You got the square, and in the middle is the courtyard. Which will bring up another question I have. It was curious that when a rabbi was invited to a house, all kinds of people came and stood in the courtyard. Visitors just came and to listen to the conversation. Now, they had to come through your house as the house is a square. So apparently these nicer homes are open and people drift in to listen. So this explains how the woman sort of worked her way in through the crowd because she is an outcast. She's a prostitute, we believe. So when a guest entered a house in those days, three things were always done. The host, in this case, Simon, would have come up and put his hand on the man's shoulder and give him a kiss, a peace. This is called a mark of respect in those days. And it was never omitted, especially by a rabbi. They always did this. Then cool water was poured over the guest's feet to cleanse or maybe comfort. Either sweet smelling incense was burned or a drop of fragrant oil was put on their forehead. The guest did not the guest did not sit, but they reclined at a sofa or a couch. They didn't have tables. So you're laying on your left arm, which would be a problem with my tennis elbows. You're laying on your left arm with your feet stretched out and you eat. And during the meal, sandals were removed. Now let's talk about Simon the Pharisee just for a second. Why do you think this man would invite Jesus to his house? Give me some reasons.
Curiosity.
Curiosity?
He'd been healed. Popularity.
Yeah, he's very popular. Yeah. Any other reason? Why is he keen, Bob?
He'd been healed of leprosy. At least that's what we believe.
Yeah, yeah. If you combine all four stories, if this is the same guy, then he has also been a leper. And I've already mentioned the discussion about if it's the same story or not. Could be very grateful. But in this case, we see how it's going to play out. Yes.
I think it's also very interesting that the text says, when the Pharisee who had invited him, instead of saying Simon, it says when the Pharisee. So it's a very objective view as this person as a Pharisee, but then Jesus calls him out by name. Like, you're not just a Pharisee, you're a person.
Yeah.
He's really trying to drill that home.
Yes.
Desire of Ages says Simon of Bethany was one of the few Pharisees who had openly joined Christ's followers.
And that's from, I'm sorry.
Desire of Ages.
Yeah. Okay, we're having a conflict in this story. It's conflicted. And I don't have all the answers to this. If he is a follower, let's see how this plays out. Yes.
Though he was a follower, and though he thought that he might set himself up as the Messiah,
he had not accepted him as a savior.
Thank you. Well, he was either an admirer, a sympathizer, or Jesus with a deliberate intention of enticing him to some word or action which could be used against him. Possibly. And like I say, he was probably a collector of celebrities. He liked people of importance at his home. And this is possibly one reason that he was invited to have a meal. Let's talk about the woman for just a second. The woman's a sinner. She's considered a bad woman and believed to be a prostitute. In Jewish culture, a woman never let her hair down, and she did in this story. And this was another reason that Simon could build his case against her. My grandmother, I saw a picture of her when she was around 1920 and she cut her hair. She never cut her hair for the rest of her life. She never let it down, but I saw. Never saw her with her hair down. So these customs are not totally foreign, especially to the Pentecostal world. So, and that didn't surprise me too much, but this was a big deal in Jewish culture. And it is believed that she might have been a follower or been following John the Baptist. And she'd probably been hearing Jesus' speeches and sermons, just some of the chat that he had with people. Obviously, one thing is for sure, her heart had been touched. What risk was she taking by coming in this room, coming into this house? A prostitute was not welcome. You remember the story of the lady at the well? Why she was coming to get water in the middle of the day? She was an outcast.
Was Simon kind of taken away by her getting attention, maybe?
Was he taken away?
With the lady getting attention that he might have been expecting?
Well, I'm sure that this was a sudden burst into, not a burst, but this just sort of came about. This was not expected. So I'm sure he was not pleased. But this was a risk for her. She was taking it by coming to this particular dinner. She wasn't invited. No one would have been invited. Now, I want you to get in your time machines and grab, your seatbelts. I want you to float back 2,000 years. Bob, yes.
Ken, in verse 17, it says that a woman who had lived a sinful life.
Yeah.
So she was no longer a prostitute. She had been forgiven.
Repeat that.
Well, she had lived a sinful life.
Yeah, she had lived that. Yeah. So you're saying she's already converted now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's showing her gratitude.
But her reputation is preceding her. Yes, sir.
There's a problem in Jewish culture. A man can have intercourse 3 times before he's considered a bad guy.
Yeah.
A woman only once.
Yeah. You got to watch it for a woman. It's not really.
And so there's a cultural norm that says she's a bad woman.
Yeah.
Because she hadn't done it just once. And Simon was one who led her into this.
We think if you combine all 4 stories.
Well,
we're 30 seconds now.
Ellen White says he was.
Yeah. Like I said, there's different scholars, different looks. Okay.
Just to keep picked up on what I was going to say, I think some of the people there were apprehensive about her being there because they had helped lead her into this type of lifestyle.
And what we're trying to do in this class is get a global view of what so many people are saying about this, so many different scholars. There is belief that this same Simon led her into prostitution. He had sex with her. He shipped her off to Magda, which was a Roman garrison there. These are things still up. This is what led her into a life of prostitution. We don't know for sure, but we know this woman's had a very, very bad time. Bad time. And it does say she had been a prostitute. And, yes, go ahead.
And maybe that's why Jesus never said, go and sin no more, like he did to the lady.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jesus was very popular at this point, and the crowds were on his side.
Yeah.
And Jesus could have, with a word, just exposed Simon.
Yeah.
And so Jesus didn't expose Simon, and he was telling me, I'm forgiving you both.
Yeah. And just to be clear, 6 years ago, last week, I taught this class, and I combined all 4 gospels into what this gentleman is saying back here, that it is the same story, that she was led into prostitution, that Simon was really a bad guy, and Simon is really, or the leper, whichever way you want to come. But it's just rich. The story is so powerful. It is just a soap opera that just doesn't seem to stop. Yes.
Well, to me, the second story doesn't come back until like 148. And it mentions Mary is the woman.
Yeah.
But Luke didn't mention the woman.
Yeah.
And the woman at the end was right before Jesus died.
Yeah.
So
Now-
that's why it doesn't.
Now, I didn't mean to get into this, and since we're here, let me give you just a little more information. Some scholars believe this is early in the ministry. And the other stories really emphasize the fact that Mary is anointing Jesus just before the cross. So that's why people are kind of pulling this way, but it doesn't matter. I mean, you cannot discount the power of the story. No matter how you want to slice and dice it, it's one of the most amazing stories that I have ever read. Yes.
Even if you just stick to this, it was the same town that she had been doing her sinful acts in, whatever those were.
Yeah.
And so the people recognized her as an outward sinner,
Yeah.
where they didn't recognize the Pharisee as an outward sinner. His sins were on the inside and
Yeah.
what was going on in his own mind. And
Yeah.
Jesus was telling us, wherever you are, I can forgive both.
Yeah, yeah. Keep talking. I don't mean to slow you down when you got something to say.
So the Pharisees trying to imply that and take away his credibility by saying, if he was a prophet, he'd know better.
Let me get to
So
that.
he's basically saying he's not who he's purporting to be.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Did I miss a hand? Yes, sir.
It strikes me that Jesus is a pretty slick guy. I mean, he got this guy to basically say she deserves more forgiveness than the others. He didn't interpret it that way, but he got him to say that, basically.
Let's project back now. Let's everyone sneak into that courtyard. Okay, and you can stand behind somebody since most people try to take the back seat. Let's walk into the house. We're behind the room here. You've heard what Jesus said. By the way, are you the Birds? I'm sorry, is your last name? Yeah, well, we were warned you were coming. Marge, I think, is related to you. She's going to
No, we
approve it.
haven't discovered that for sure. So don't put that on him. But you can tell.
If you're not.
Tell how you heard about them. His connection with Marlene. Do I need to remind you?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. I'm not getting it, but
And said Marlene is
Yeah.
the one who told you.
Yeah,
you were
yeah,
gonna be
yeah,
coming,
right, yeah.
Because his brother is her boss.
that's right. Yeah, thank you,
There, now
Marlene.
you've got it.
Yeah, thank you for leading these poor sheep into this treacherous place. Thank you. Yeah, well, let's go back now. Let's get back in the scene. You've heard what happened. You heard what Jesus said to the Pharisee. You're a Jew, and we're walking into this dinner. You are part of the neighborhood. Don't sit in your seat and answer this, but give me less than 30 seconds. Would you have leaned towards Simon's point of view? Now, you're not 2,000 years later. You're a guy that knows this Pharisee, pretty popular. Would you have leaned toward Simon's point of view about what he said? Would you have been glad when Jesus dressed down the Pharisee? Would you feel good about that? I mean, you're in the neighborhood. You go to the market. You pick up your clothes at the cleaners with these same guys. How would you have felt?
Do you think that everybody else heard him explaining this to Simon, and only Simon could really get this?
I think everybody in the room heard what he was saying. That's why they were there, to listen and try to see what was going on.
Well, and Simon didn't say that with a lot of enthusiasm. Okay, when he said, who would you think would be more, well, I suppose the one that owed more. He didn't really want to admit that the way I get it, because that messed up their paradigm.
I mean, would you have been shocked that Jesus would treated this man this way? He's a guest. That you would talk to his host this way?
I would have to argue with you. I think he had a private little conversation with Simon, and then it says he turned to the woman and said, your sins are forgiven. And the people heard that.
Would it be okay if we disagreed on it?
I think everybody was embarrassed by this whole.
It's what?
Everybody was embarrassed by this whole.
Yeah, let's talk about the woman for a second. I mean, you're in the room, you're trying to listen to what these VIPs are saying. They're very well-known people. I won't say they're popular, but I mean, Jesus is now the talk of the countryside. Would you have been comfortable with a woman's with her actions?
Yeah. I don't think anyone here can understand Pharisaism. Even a good Pharisaical Adventist does not compare.
We don't have
Not in the town.
Does not compare to what I saw when I lived in Israel. The Pharisaism was so strong that, for example, while I was in Israel, on the news, there was a big discussion of whether you could pick your nose on Sabbath or not. I'm serious. This was a serious discussion of whether you could pick your nose on Sabbath. Was that okay?
Well,
and they decided that yes, you could.
Well,
as long as you don't pull any hairs out. Now, I'm serious. That was a serious, open conversation. The Pharisaism of that day and today are very similar, and we don't live like that. And it's hard to put ourselves in that situation.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, we're going to try anyway. Just imagine you're the most conservative person. Don't imagine that. Just try to put yourself back there. What will your attitude be about this woman? And hold it for 30 seconds. I'm getting plenty of hands. This is wonderful. 30 seconds. How would you have felt? Honestly.
Knowing what I know today, if I was transferred.
No, what you knew then?
Well,
How would you have felt?
that's not me, that's some other dude.
You're trying to get, don't you watch any movies? John, you gotta go back in time.
If I lived there, I would be confused.
There you go.
I have read that Simon was healed from leprosy, and this happened at a time whenever Jesus had raised Lazarus, and he was there.
Yeah.
I have read that Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were siblings living in Simon's house,
Okay.
and that because she had lived in Simon's house, she could sneak in, and even if she was not sneaking in, the people recognized.
Stay with this story.
Yeah.
Stay with this story.
Right.
Stay with this story.
I am.
Yeah.
We got someone. I'm just raising your.
Yeah, okay, good. This woman is, maybe she was living there, maybe it's the whole story, but we're keeping the story separated today. I know that's hard for somebody. It was taught today. Doug wrote the lesson to keep it separated. So all I'm asking you is, then if you can't project back then, project yourself now. Would you have been comfortable with this woman coming in, grabbing Jesus' feet, kissing them, crying on him, holding him, sobbing hysterically? Would you have been comfortable?
The answer would be no. There wouldn't hardly anybody.
It would be
that
awkward, like Marlene said.
I'm sorry.
It would be awkward, like Marlene said.
Yeah, it's fair, yeah, yes.
Or Beth. I guess
I was
it
at
Beth.
church one time, we had prayer, and people were standing. Some people have you standing when you're praying is heresy, but anyway, they were standing. And the lady comes down and lays down flat denial. And everybody in the church was very uncomfortable. It just wasn't done.
Well, we're just,
But that day it was.
yeah, we're still finding our way as a church about how we treat people.
Marlene?
Yes, Marlene, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Can
can
you
hear,
hear me?
we can even see you.
Okay. I would like to take it home right now. A few years ago, at your hotel at the Embassy Suites in the afternoon, we saw an LGBTQ video, and somebody came and talked to us about how it is having been in that life and how changed he was. I was so impressed with that. I shared it with a very good Christian friend, and I had invited her to attend. She said, no way will I go to a church and sit or have my grandchildren sit next to an LGBTQ or Q person. It really, really struck me very hard. And then I take it home. How would I feel if my children are like that?
Yeah.
So it's easier to see the 1,000 years ago and say, oh, I would have never done that, but right now it is happening.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Marlene. Anybody else on the Zoom? Anyone else out here? If you're thinking about saying something, and this is what I was telling a young member last week. We have a young member who's, I'm so happy when more younger people come in. If you're under 60, you're young. We're so glad that you're here. We really are. And there's some people in this room that come and go, and they're this close to making a statement for the first time in their life in this room. But they won't do it. They won't do it. Took Alan 2 years to finally raise his hand. Now I can't stop it. But if Jesus is telling you something right now that you feel you have to share, please don't sit and grind your hand under your seat. Share it with me. If you are so moved, Bob.
My reaction would depend on whether I was a believer in Jesus or not.
I'm sorry. Going down is tough. Why now?
My reaction would depend on whether I was a believer in Jesus or not.
Oh, yeah. 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 And I don't know how many people are real believers. We don't know that. We know that everybody was curious. Everybody was curious. Now let's come back to the Sabbath school room. What was Simon's attitude or feeling or emotions towards Jesus as we end the story? How is Simon feeling now? Your thoughts. You've read the story. We've kicked it around. Where is Simon leaving it now? He's already made up his mind. Where do you think he is? 60. What would be the word? Sorry? Sounds like my wife's cell phone when she's got it on the speaker. I have no idea what's going on.
I don't think we really have any idea, but it could have been anywhere from, humbleness to just outright anger. I mean, he was being pretty much chided right in his own home.
Yeah, this is in his house.
And we haven't touched on that. Wasn't that perfume a year's salary?
Well, if we combine all 4 stories, it's 2 years' salary.
Yeah.
Okay. So you talked about how embarrassed would you be if somebody came and gave you $100,000 gift then?
When I did this story 5 years ago, the average income for a single mom was, I think, $31,000 a year. This is 6 years ago, maybe worse now. You take $62,000 and you pour it out in one event out of a bottle. If you're going to combine these stories, let's combine them. $62,000, 2 years' wages. That's quite a gift. Somebody was pretty thankful. Pretty thankful. My take on this is this whole setup, or this whole invitation has just been on a conditional basis. The word for me was conditional. And he starts it. when he really attacks Jesus. If this man were a prophet, he would know who he's touching and what kind of woman she is.
Who did he say this to?
Himself.
Who did he say this to?
Just saying it right to Jesus, to the crowd.
No, he said it to himself. The Bible says it said it to himself, so he wasn't speaking
Oh, that's
out
right, yeah.
loud.
He's saying it to himself. I'm sorry. He's saying it to himself.
But if he said it to himself, how is it in the Bible? Because he didn't write the Bible.
Well, I don't know. Let's get Mr. Byrd over here to help you with that one, some more scholars or Bob. But it says Jesus is really as reading his mind. He knows his thoughts. Yeah.
I would say Simon's thoughts were self-righteous. I think that's where he's coming from.
Yeah. Yes, sorry.
Well, to answer that one question, how do they know? It's very possible Jesus was talking with his disciples later, and he revealed to him that he could tell that's what he was thinking. Because I think it was common knowledge that the Holy Spirit and God knows our every thought and every intention. So that's how it got in the story. But I was going to address that very thought that if he was indeed wondering, how could he possibly be doing this? I mean, how could he be a prophet if he doesn't know what kind of woman she is? But when Jesus says to him, she is forgiven much, without saying directly that he knew what she really was, he confirmed in Simon's mind that he was indeed a prophet, and he knows very much so that she is a sinner, and that this is then that's how he treats a person like that. So I bet Simon was wondering.
30 seconds.
Well, was Simon wondering, does he then know what my sin is about how she got there? And so he was like, I better be quiet because I don't want him to reveal what I've done.
We're doing the mind reading thing. It's not good. And we know that Luke got his information from eyewitnesses. You know, the other apostles was there. You know, and he got it from eyewitnesses. And so this is how it's recorded. Yes.
Keith,
yeah.
some of us are ornery enough to think, oh, good, he got what's coming to him.
Yeah. Simon is judging Jesus. And I believe in his mind, he's done. I mean, he's seen enough of Jesus. So I think that's why the story, the parable comes about. Jesus is reading his thoughts and he's saying, okay, if you're thinking this way, then let me tell you a story. Let me ask you a question. Jesus is trying to tell Simon, and if you pick up the story about judging here, he says, you have judged correctly. He said, which one, was forgiven the most? And he's coming right back at Simon and says, Simon, you answered the question correctly. You've judged correctly. And Jesus is saying, as a matter of fact, you've been judging me since I walked into this house, and you finally judged something correctly. You've shown me absolutely no respect since I walked into your house. There was no kiss. There was no water, no oil. I think Jesus is saying, Simon, you don't even believe that you have a debt, and a debt is a sin in this case. You don't really believe you even have a sin. You're sin-free. Her debts or her sins were many and are now forgiven because she loved so much. The bottom line is Simon doesn't need Jesus. And it becomes very evident that he doesn't. Period. Well, before we move out to some more questions from this, any comments? Yes.
But don't you think that Christ's grace was trying to reach Simon?
Of course.
That it wasn't just about, he knew Simon's heart. He wanted Simon to look at him differently.
Jesus knew how this was probably going to play out the second he went to the door, before he even knew that. And that's a good lesson for some people that I think I asked the question a few months ago in a class. Have you ever been invited to an outing or a business meeting or something, and somebody was there that you didn't like, and you didn't want to go? And about 2 people raised their hand, and I said, rest of you see me after class, because this is the last one. And you're lying, all of you are lying. See me after class. For someone who will reach out to another person, knowing that they don't like each other. I'll give you an example. There's a guy I've been bumping into for 20 years downtown. He's a big executive, big executive. There was an incident at one of my homes 35, 40 years ago. And it was embarrassing for me and it was embarrassing for him. Now, we see each other 4 or 5 times a year, and usually it's at the trade center downtown, the convention center. You know how long that hall is down through there? It's probably 1,000 feet. It's much longer than from the end to end of this church. And we see each other coming for 1,000 feet, and we're the only people there, and we don't speak to each other because we're not comfortable with each other. So finally, a couple of years ago, I said, enough of this. So I go right over in front of him and shake his hand. I said, Tommy, how you doing? I couldn't stop the conversation. He was so relieved just because I reached out to him. And this had been going, this was ridiculous. It had been going on for years. And now we see each other and it's, hey, how you doing? Or from a distance. But for 40 years, we don't speak. And now we don't like each other. We're just uncomfortable with each other. Very uncomfortable. There are Adventists you're very uncomfortable with. And for years, I didn't want to talk to them. Because you're the people that sort of caused my first go around in the church not to be quite successful in my mind. But now it doesn't bother me. I mean, if you know who you are with Jesus, why would it bother you to go up and talk to someone that you sort of didn't have a lot going for? You know, Kerry, I don't know him. I love it. He sits in the same spot he's here every week. I got to get to know him a little bit better. You know, I'm not uncomfortable with it. Yeah.
Well, if you know who you are with Jesus, it won't bother you to say anything to anyone. I mean, take the woman at the well, for example, who Jesus told, well, you've had 5 husbands and the guy you're with now isn't your husband. She went and told the whole town. She was probably the most outcast person in the town, and yet she told everyone in that town about Jesus.
Do you see how great these stories are? When you start processing and stuff, we just don't hardly ever have a story that just isn't fantastic. This woman was extremely emotional. The load had lifted. And I want to talk to you about getting a little more emotional with your life. We all get into a routine and we all dread things, but I have a good friend, Barney Miller. Now, he's going to come teach this class soon, I hope. He's an African-American. He's a black man here in Chattanooga. He has really the only interracial church in Chattanooga. I've been to it. It's great. Barney Miller used to write songs with Michael Jackson. He wrote songs with Tina Turner. He was to help people that were recording officers. He had a call 30, 40 years ago. He gave it all up. Gave up New York, gave up recordings. He is doing a play, writing a play now for the music with Tina Turner. And COVID hit, I don't know what happened to the Broadway play. Bernie gave it all up. The prostitute gave it all up. He's all in. And now he has one of the most popular churches in Chattanooga. He's going to come teach us. So anyway, I have a meeting with him just because he's a great guy. And I tell him an experience that we had in this class. And I tell him about what happened and just a big wow moment. And he starts clapping his hands and he's stomping his feet at the table and he starts laughing. Very emotional about his religion. He's not going to hide it. You know, his life is going to burn. His light is going to burn. Should emotion play a major role in your religious experience? I hope so. Let's read another story. Who's got a Bible? Ron, who's got a Bible? Anybody? I want someone to turn to, yeah, Carrie, you got it, Ron?
Sharon has a Bible.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. Turn to Luke 17, 11 through 19. Luke 17, 11 through 19. We're talking about people that are getting emotional now. And the Bible is full of it. You got it? Would you read that, please?
Now it happened as he went to Jerusalem that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. Then as he entered a certain village, there met him 10 men who were lepers, who stood afar off. And they lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. So when he saw them, he said to them, go show yourselves to the priest. And so it was, as they went, they were cleansed. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, returned and with a loud voice glorified God, and fell down on his face at his feet, giving him thanks, and he was a Samaritan. So Jesus answered and said, were there not 10 cleansed, and where are the 9? Were there not any found who returned to give glory to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, arise, go your way, your faith has made you well.
Okay. We have a very emotional scene again. The person runs up and throws himself at Jesus' feet. Very, very emotional. Regarding the woman, the point I'm trying to make is if we're regarding the woman in today's story, and if you combine all the other gospels, the other 4 stories, one of the gospel in Matthew, it says, for what this woman did, let me read it to you. I tell you the truth, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done today will also be told in memory of her. That's how big this story is. It's a massive emotional moment for everyone. And this story brings out the emotions in most people that read it. They're so thankful that they become emotional. Simon had no emotions in this because he didn't have any sin. He didn't need Jesus. A friend of mine was telling me last night, if you take the emotion out of this whole biblical thing, if you take the emotion out of it, it's like trying to explain to somebody what a violin is. Well, it's a shape this way, and it's got some strings, 6 strings, and you tighten the strings, and you have this bow you rub across it, and it makes sounds. And what's that? There's no emotion in it. At Oakwood College years ago, I was there as a guest, and I heard a young student play How Great Thou Art on a violin, accompanied by a piano. And it was one of the most moving experiences that I've ever had with music. The inflections of the notes on the piano and the runs as the girl on the violin hit the high notes, and they held, and the piano went up and down. I can tell you about it, but unless you heard it, you can't get emotionally involved with it. Yes, ma'am.
Like the scripture appeals, taste and see that the Lord is good. You can use all kinds of words to describe a taste, but it can't unless the person tastes it.
Yeah, I mean, how do you describe it? I want to leave one other thing with you as we're start wrapping up. Last week, John's disciples came asking, are you the one, or should we expect someone else? Are you really the person that I preached about? Because I'm getting very discouraged. I'm very discouraged here. I'm in a horrible place. I'm in a dungeon. I've been here a long time. This story validates John the Baptist's ministry and fulfillment of what John said about Jesus. People are healed. The good news is preached, and now sins are forgiven. So it's complete. Tell John this. And when John's men returned, I would say that John had a very emotional moment when he heard these wonderful things that Jesus had been doing. And in spite of the horrible conditions that he was living in, I have to believe, and I can't back this up, that if someone came to me and I found out that they are now confirming my life's work was a success, that had to help him enter into some kind of peace, knowing, not necessarily knowing, he probably had a good idea what was going to happen to him. But I would say this was a great emotional moment for him to be affirmed that my life was not wasted, that you really are here. And now I can go on to the next step in my short life. And I this may sound a little mundane if you're new here. Some of the teachers don't take my approach. Mine is trying to get you from this Saturday to next Friday. That's all I want to do. Just get you one more week down the road and be encouraged. That's all I want to do. But emotion or wow moments for this class is everything. When we prepare the lessons, we'll kind of talk, well, what's the wow moment? What are you going to leave here that you probably hadn't realized before, or at least you have forgotten and you remember now? We have some people here who are ministers, some people who have worked in the ministry, and they even sometimes need or are happy to be refreshed. Let me give you some wow moments from me in this class, and you tell me, and I'm going to try to do it quickly here, about, I don't know, 2 months ago, Doug came and taught about the woman on the well, woman at the well. Heard it 1,000 times, wonderful story, brought up today. And Doug starts out the story, and I've never seen this, right under your nose. It's, wow, I didn't know that. He said, Jesus had to go through Samaria. It starts out there. I mean, if you read it, that's what Jesus had. He didn't have to go through Samaria. Why have I never seen that before? The last place those guys wanted to do, what they wanted to do was go through Samaria. They hated Samaria. Wow. That's been there all these years. I didn't see the first 5 words. Jesus had to go through. He didn't have to go through. That's just a wow for me. Why did he send guys, just 12 guys to go get lunch that day? Wow. You know, 12 guys to go get a sandwich. You needed time. You know, when Doug's asked the other day, is Jesus amazed with you or is he bored with you? I mean, those are kind of, and then when we finally learned that the miracle at Cana wasn't about a bunch of wine being turned down or saving somebody from, that's not what it was about. It was about change. And when he went to Nicodemus, he said, Nicodemus, I know why you want me here because you heard about that miracle. You don't even understand what happened, Nicodemus. Those 5 pots, those stone pots are you. You're holding that water. And that water you're holding will suddenly change to this beautiful miracle. And you don't get it. You have to change. And those are big time wow moments for me. I don't know if anything comes to your mind that you walked out of here with it, you were just blown away with, but it usually happens to me every week. I was at a Rotary Club meeting years ago, and it was Pastor's Day. So I actually had a pastor. So I took him to Rotary. And it was a guy who had graduated from a seminary in New York. And I was actually shocked. He said what he said about the Bible. And that's just what I'm trying to tell you. He said, first day in seminary, they had this famous professor and Dr. So-and-so, and the room was packed. He said, how many people want to go to the mission field? I know a couple of people. How many people want to go into church administration? No, these weren't Adventists, Presbyterians or something. How many people want to go into publishing? Okay, how many people want to be ministers? And the whole room rose up, they want to be ministers. So he turned his back on them and he's walking away. He said, well, I guess that's okay if you can't do anything else. And he said, you know, if Jesus is calling you to the ministry, you can't do anything else. You will be miserable. You will go job to job, position, but if you're called, you have to go. Your life will not work out if Jesus is calling you to the ministry. So, wow. You know, and I sort of feel like if we can bring some wow moments to you and get you emotional about this book, and the old professor said, you know why I've stayed with it all these decades? Why I've stayed in the ministry? And he grabbed his Bible and he said, because this is just so interesting. I can't let it go. He said, it holds me in place. And I get emotional about it. Those wow moments don't come along every day. They don't. So I hope as we walk out of here, that your wow moments will come more often and they'll become contagious. Is my prayer for you. If you don't want to get on our radio, email us, see me.
Father in heaven, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for opening our eyes to seeing how compassionate you can be. You do not want to openly embarrass us, but you want to forgive us. Thank you for that forgiveness, Lord, for all of us are sinners. Bless us now as we go into the after service. May we see you in a new light there as well. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for coming.